Right, I've got a nice photograph here of a very attractive stone-built barn which isn't too far from where I live, and it's got quite a few little things that are very useful for us to look at the first stages of painting buildings. And I want you to have a look at one particular feature which, if you can get your head around this, resolves most of the perspective problems, particularly with buildings. And this is this question I mentioned in DVD 2 on perspective drawing and the eye line. You can see this line I've drawn through here, and that is basically my eye line, and all my eye line is, as I've said previously, is the height at which my eyes are looking at an object. The easiest way to work out your eye line where you've got even courses of stone is to find the one line that actually runs straight through the building. The ones above start increasingly, as the building gets taller, angling down towards my eye line like that, and the ones below you can see are angling upwards. It's going to be quite a warm day anyway that we're depicting, so the raw sienna is going to help capture that warmth and give a unity throughout. And I'm concentrating on keeping things nice and free and smooth. Just, you can see I'm almost just putting in a hint of where some darker stones might go. Now I'm going to do the same here, but just a touch darker. Now you can see while it's still damp, I'm just dropping in some bits and pieces of blue and the yellow to create the mossy effect. Right, now finally I'm going to put a light red colour on these doors. This is basically an undercoat. Right, now in this opening here, what I want to create is just a hint of half a door that's closed of grey unpainted weathered wood, very similar to the colour we're going to use here. And to achieve that sort of colour, again, it's the same sort of colour we've been using with the raw sienna, but just a little bit more ultramarine blue added. Right, I've put in the trees now, dark next to light there and light next to dark there on the shadow side. Now to make this very dark colour, I've got ultramarine and light red mixed very strong, it's almost a black, and then I've brought in some raw sienna here. It's just a completely indistinct shape, and it just gives the impression that maybe there's something going on in there, some activity that forms the main focus of the picture. Right, now the shadow colour is going on is more of a light red than the ultramarine blue, very gentle, because I want to leave those light flecks that we've reserved before just to get stained and not muddied. And a nice straight area for that, and then bring this out here and drag this down there like that and away towards the back of the building. Now you can see I'm just dragging that colour in. It's going to dry off very light, but it gives a nice indication in the foreground. I'm just leaving a slight gap there, so it just helps to emphasize the shadow area around the building and really switches on the sunlight. When you're drawing an old building, an old barn such as this, or any old building where the roof line is a little bit iffy to say the least, don't be afraid to exaggerate it, because if you draw it slightly or usually the realistic way that it actually looks, very often people think you've made a mistake and drawn it or painted it badly. If you exaggerate the dips and the humps and the hollows in it, then anybody looking at it will think, oh hang on, he couldn't have made that mistake and not noticed it. It must be like that. Now this is obviously the sunlit side, so I really don't want this to get too dark. And you can see here how we can now, just like we pick out shapes here in the foreground, we can do exactly the same with stonework here. Right, we'll add some darker sandstone colour here where there are some fairly obvious breaks and cracks in the sandstone, so that gives a nice sort of effect and a fairly solid base, which of course it is, to the barn itself. And don't be afraid to go into the shadow, because you'll have things like that, stones and rocks and what have you, that are half in and half out the shadows, there, or you can create them half in and half out the shadows if you want. As we come down, you see it's starting to hit and miss. Take out the drain pipe. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit curvy, this, or cockeyed. It is a farm. You don't expect things like drain pipes necessarily to be arrow straight in a farm environment. Now that's not quite the end, because what I've also done is a couple of other little pictures based on this barn where I've changed a few features around. Here I've done one on blue Bockingford paper, more or less as per the colours in the photograph, but you can see I've turned it into a snowy scene. I've slightly flattened the roof in doing so, but it's given a completely different atmosphere, and being done on that pale blue paper gives it a nice, cool, wintry scene, using primarily the same colours. Now here's one where I've actually used the eye level, my eye level, I've taken at the top of the barn, you can see there. I've varied the stones, I've turned this into some sort of rough wood that's flaking paint and seen better days. It's a bit battered, this barn, and there's a hole in the roof here. Not difficult to create with some lights that I've left as if they were the struts and the spars underneath the tiles, or where the tiles should be. So that's a completely different atmosphere. But let's change that one even more, because what I'm going to do now is to put a raw sienna glaze over the whole thing. The picture is bone dry, it was actually painted yesterday, so it's bone dry, but I'm going over the whole scene as gently and as quickly as I can. As far as possible, I'm avoiding painting more than one stroke on any part of the picture. Just let's have a look at what it looked like before. Okay, so you can see even with this gentle glow that we've imparted, it's added quite a different atmosphere to the painting. Now I know it's a bit of a bravery test if you've done a nice painting and then I'm saying to you, right, now put a glaze of a completely different colour over the whole lot. So if that worries you, get an old painting that perhaps hasn't quite worked, and for all you know, you've got every chance of creating a little picture from one that you thought had failed previously.